Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Province 4 and 5 Creation Care Network. We are, today is Monday, May 12th, 2025, and we are here with Lella Lowe. She will be talking to us about
Hello. I'm
divestiture,
kind of half listening. What's your schedule
divestiture,
today?
and
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I?
No, that's Jill who we need to,
Oops.
Oh, I'm sorry.
and
Let us open in prayer. Thank you, Lella. Today I grabbed I shouldn't say grabbed. I was reading through some Blessed Tomorrow information, and Blessed Tomorrow has 6 interfaith creation care prayers, and I took the one from the Buddhist creation care prayer for today. Let us pray. We gently caress you, the earth, our planet, and our home. Our vision has brought us closer to you, making us aware of the harm we have done to the life network upon which we ourselves depend. We are reminded that we have poisoned your waters, your lands, your air. We have filled you with the bones of our dead from war and greed. Your pain is our pain. Touching you gently, we pray that we may become peace bringers and life bringers, so that our home in its journey around the sun does not become a sterile and lonely place. May this prayer and its power last forever. Amen. So Lella, I'm going to let you take it away. You
All right.
now have control of the meeting.
Okay. All right, let's see if I can get this to work. Okay, everybody good with that? Thank you for joining for a topic that sounds like, I don't know, we were concerned about this. I named it "What's the Big Deal with Fossil Fuel Divestment? Next Steps for the Episcopal Church." So I'm proud of all of you for joining a meeting with that title. There was a brief discussion of naming it "Money, Sex, and Power" in the Episcopal Church Pension Fund by someone who shall remain nameless unless they decide to out themselves. But we're going to go with the discussion about divestment. And what I want to do is lay a theological foundation for what I'm about to discuss. And I know everybody on this call has worked in environmental areas for a long time, and you don't really need this, but in some ways, this is like a springboard for a persuasive talk on this issue. So bear with me as we start in the beginning, because in the beginning, at the very beginning of the Bible, at the beginning of time, God created. And God indeed said that everything was good. God loved God's creation. And in doing so, God gave an intrinsic worth or value to everything that was created. The value of creation is not because we say it's valuable or that we can extract or sell. None of that matters. It matters that God says everything is valuable. And then shortly after the creation, God gave us our first vocational call when God said, "You will till and keep my creation," or actually that is better interpreted as, "You will protect and serve this creation." And then shortly after that, God made a covenant with Noah after he had told Noah to preserve all of the animals, and made a covenant that extends to all of us that we will continue to preserve. And yet, as Bill McKibben, climate activist, says, we have begun to run creation backwards through our causing of species extinction and biodiversity loss. And in fact, all the way from the beginning of creation to just recently when Pope Francis issued his encyclical Laudato Si. And he said that all creations need an ecological conversion. Some ridicule that concern for environment. Others are indifferent to it. They say we didn't cause it. We shouldn't have to do anything about it. And Pope Francis was saying, no, living our vocation to protect God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. So let's consider in that light that we have a vocation to do this, to take care of creation. What exactly have we been doing? Let's start by looking at, I like this NASA picture of the planet from space and this comment from astronaut Sally Ride. When she said, in looking at the planet, I noticed on the horizon what looks like a blue crayon tracing around the planet. And she realized that thin blue line is the Earth's atmosphere. And that's all there is. That's all there is to the atmosphere. When Al Gore is giving talks, he likes to say that if you were driving along a highway at highway speeds, 60 to 70 miles an hour, and instead of going parallel or even with the planet, you turned and went perpendicular, and you went straight up in the sky at highway speeds, you would escape that atmosphere in 5 minutes. That's how thin it is. I've heard it likened to the skin of an apple. If the globe was an apple, the thickness would be the thickness of the skin of the apple. So there's not much there, folks. And that every day we're putting 175 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into that thin atmosphere. And some of that, yes, is caused by things like agriculture, from the famous cows' burps, that kind of thing, emitting methane. But by far, the bulk of that man-made pollution, 80% of it, is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. And so there was a group that started studying, it was a think tank in 2011, started studying how much exactly is being emitted into the atmosphere. And they came up with some numbers. They were saying, okay, well, we've got 2 degrees, we're not supposed to go over 2 degrees warming. How much more can we emit and not go over 2 degrees of warming? So Bill McKibben took that study, the climate, hold on a second, it's called Carbon Tracker. He took that study and he wrote an article that was, I think it may still stand as the most read article in Rolling Stone magazine's history, called Global Warming's Terrifying New Math. And he looked at those numbers that were prepared by the Carbon Tracker group. And he said, this is where it goes. He says there are 3 scary numbers here. The first number we all know, 2 degrees Celsius, is the most that we should allow the planet to warm, because they have tracked that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is directly relative to the amount of warming. And if we go above 2 degrees Celsius, we will see drastic changes in the climate. We already see it. We're at 1.5 degrees. And we're already seeing more intense storms, flooding, wildfires, and so on. So 2 degrees is the absolute maximum. The next scary number is the amount of gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents that can go into the atmosphere and not exceed that 2 degrees Celsius. So that 565 gigaton number is from 2012. So that's 13 years ago. That was our emissions budget, if you will. And here's the real scary number that he shared in that article. Almost 2,800 gigatons of carbon is currently on the balance sheets of our fossil fuel companies as reserves that they have already discovered. This is the amount of carbon that they plan to take out of the ground and have us burn. So they have 80% more on their books than can possibly be burned and still have a safe planet. So in order to stop this madness, because that 80% over represents $20 trillion on the books of the fossil fuel companies, Bill McKibben proposed that we divest from fossil fuels. So time went on. I actually went to, he did a huge tour explaining this after he did that article, and another friend on the commission here locally and I went up to Atlanta to hear him do this. So it's been many years that I've been thinking about this. But then recently, I guess it's continuing to gain traction. A lot of the colleges have divested. Some cities have divested. The United Church of Christ has divested. And then in June of 23, the Church of England announced that their pension board has decided to divest from fossil fuels. And I was so proud. I thought, how cool is this? And then this is going to be a clip I want to play for you. It's a 1.5-minute clip at the 2023 Wild Goose Festival. And this is a session that was a conversation between Bill McKibben on the left and Diana Butler Bass in the middle. And then that's the moderator on that side. And I'm going to have to, I haven't figured out how to put a clip into a PowerPoint. So I'm going to have to zoom up to the, so hold on just a minute. Let me move this.
Sort of over into some of the religious and denominational questions as well, because one of the things that I'm pretty sure this is the case. So the UCC, if I'm not wrong, just divested its pension fund from fossil fuels, which is incredible. But most of the other main lines came out with statements about 10 years ago divesting sort of liquid funds in other places from fossil fuels, but left their pension funds invested in fossil fuels. So as far as I know, right now, as we sit here today, one of the richest pension funds in religion in the world is the Episcopal Church Pension Group. And if you're a retired Episcopal priest, your money is still invested in fossil fuels. And the only people who are going to be able to convince that fund to disinvest, to get their money out of there, are you all.
And you got to do it because the C of E divested last week. So,
Right.
you know, the heat is on.
So that's one of these places where this work overlaps, where I'm constantly telling people as well who are over 60 or just retired from mainline pastorates, I know you're tired, it's been hell, but guess what? You're just getting
More work to
started.
Well, but it's much easier without all those, you know, annoying parishioners around to cause you trouble. So, you know.
And to threaten to fire you.
Well,
Okay, that I have always been proud of my church, of the Episcopal Church, of the causes that they champion, the fact that they've always walked the talk, walked the gospel. But I have to tell you that I was completely appalled on hearing that particular statement by these two. So let me see if I can get this to advance. So what I did is I had contacted Phoebe Chatfield in the bishop's office for creation care and said, hey, don't we need to share that information, at least about the Church of England divesting? And she says, why don't you write an article? Because it's more impressive if somebody responds to something that happened. So after several months, I finally got around to writing an article. And so in February of 24, this ran in the Creation Care newsletter. And as far as I know, there was absolutely no reaction to it, or if there was a reaction, she didn't tell me. So that's where it stood. But I kept, I kept researching. I had an opinion there, but I have since kind of modified what I thought based on some things I've learned. For example, it turns out that we have a corporate social responsibility committee that had previously issued, and it was last updated in June of 23, a no-buy portfolio list of stocks that we shouldn't buy and have in our portfolios. This is it's currently a 9-page list of stocks, 6 of which deal with fossil fuels that we shouldn't have in our portfolios. It includes other things like for-profit prisons and tobaccos and human rights issues, but primarily it's fossil fuels. And then it turns out, I listened to a thing they did on investment, on responsible investing. The church put one on, and it turns out over 50 years, they have been trying to use investments to accomplish mission. In 1970, whoever was the presiding bishop back then said that they were going to start looking at that, use your investments to accomplish missions. So they stopped investments in South Africa when that was a thing, to try to get apartheid to stop. They stopped divestment in tobacco, stopped investing in for-profit prisons. And then in 2015, they had the first resolution at General Convention suggesting that we needed to divest from fossil fuels. And that went on being re-upped every 3 years until finally in this past summer, General Convention gave a deadline for divesting from fossil fuels. They gave a deadline of the end of the year of last year. So the Episcopal Church has been using their investments for mission for over 50 years. And then finally, we see this announcement in December of this past year, they announced that they had completely divested from the fossil fuel industry. And I got emails from a couple of you saying, hey, this is great, we've divested. But it turns out, you remember Diana Butler Bass talking about those kind of mushy investments that are just out there? Those are what they divested. It was about $500 million worth of what she would call mushy investments that the Episcopal Church held. They completely did not divest the pension fund. So I emailed this David Paulson, who wrote this article, and said, hey, this is kind of greenwashing on the part of the Episcopal Church, isn't it? And he goes, well, yeah, that probably needs to be explored. But in the meantime, there was this big splashy announcement. So I created this graph. Graphs are not necessarily my thing to create, but let's just get an idea of the scope of this. So this is a graph of the investments of the Episcopal Church, and the left column is millions of dollars. So it goes up to 20 billion at the top. Here is the Episcopal Church investments, $500 million that they divested. And keep in mind, they didn't divest $500 million of fossil fuels. It was $500 million of investments, and whatever portion of that was fossil fuels, they divested. Here is the graph of the holdings of the church pension fund, $17.5 billion. That's what they haven't touched. And someone who should know this stuff told me, but only 8% of the church pension fund is invested in fossil fuels. Well, folks, 8% of $17.5 billion is still $1.4 billion, which is almost 3 times the entire investments of the Episcopal Church. It's a significant number that we're ignoring, basically. So my question is, why is the church pension group still investing in fossil fuels? They have been using their investments for over 50 years to achieve mission. There is a no-buy list that has existed for several years of things we shouldn't be investing in. The Church of England has divested the pension plan, but why hasn't church pension fund divested? So in asking that question, I keep hearing 2 answers over and over again. One of them is the church pension fund board believes that they have the most influence if they are stockholders, and they can sit in the room and influence corporate decision making. That's their stance, that they can influence it that way, and that is superior to completely divesting. Unfortunately, based on things we've already learned about the trillions of dollars that the fossil fuel companies have in stranded assets on their balance sheets, somebody sitting at a table and asking them to do better isn't going to have an impact. They have $20 trillion of assets they need to get out of the ground and have us burn. It is not effective to sit at the table. And then the second answer that I always hear is fiduciary responsibility. And it turns out that pension funds are regulated under the Department of Labor by something called the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, and that the benefit of plan participants has to be primary, and that nothing they can do can cause, I guess, lower earnings. So that's making them responsible fiduciary agents for the pension plan holders. And then I was talking, and I talked to a lot of people, and in the process of talking to someone, he said the quiet part out loud when he said, everyone is fine talking about social investing, but don't mess with their retirement money. And you know what my head went to when I heard that? It was, oh, okay, so I can just hear Jesus telling the rich young ruler, okay, so you followed all the laws and the so the only thing you have left to do is go take care of your pension plan and then come and follow me. Like, this just rings very untrue. But I want to look at, would they really be irresponsible if they got out of fossil fuels? We know about the investment risks. We've talked about stranded assets. At some point, either once we go over 2 degrees Celsius and they say stop burning fossil fuels, or at some point they're going to regulate them out and say you cannot get this out of the ground. So they're going to end up, the companies are on a downhill slide because of that. Secondly, climate risks. Or not all, but a great many of their assets are along the coastline where sea levels are rising, and they're subject to hurricanes. For example, I worked for a number of years at the Chevron refinery in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And one year I probably foolishly volunteered to be on the hurricane ride-out group. And so I stayed in the refinery during a hurricane coming in. And I should have known there was trouble when they issued us a good thick rope to tie ourselves to the door if the roof blew off, or to tie ourselves to something if the waters rose. The point is, though, that they have numerous assets along the coastlines that are at risk. And then finally, and perhaps most persuasive, is that the energy you get from renewables is now cheaper than the energy you get from fossil fuels. So given all of these investment risks, is it really irresponsible to get out of fossil fuels? This is an interesting chart if you're into charts. This was just issued maybe a year ago, and it was a group looking at the last 20 years of, well, this just shows 10, but of climate, of Standard & Poor's performance. The blue line is the 500, the value of the S&P. The yellow line is if you just pull out the energy companies, they perform well under the S&P 500. And then the black line is if you took the S&P 500 and you pulled the energy companies out, you would actually perform better. So I know my conclusion from that is that it is not irresponsible to pull out of fossil fuels. You have a slight bump in 2022 in fossil fuels, and that's because we were coming back online after COVID. So there was a big surge in energy use. And also, well, let me go to the next slide because I talk about that. The temporary boost from the pandemic recovery and the Russian invasion of Ukraine caused their fortunes to temporarily pop up. But the low carbon energy index funds have outperformed the traditional benchmark standards. And now it is possible for large and small institutional funds to invest in all kinds of low performing carbon index funds. So this popped up in Catherine Hayhoe's Substack this past week, and she was reporting on the journal Nature had published a study in just a few weeks ago, and it said that the total climate damage by the biggest corporations' fossil fuel has amounted to a dollar value of $28 trillion. And I pulled out a quote about Chevron because I talked about them just a few minutes ago, but they were the worst of the companies they looked at, and they said up to $3.6 trillion in heat-related losses. Now, the $28 trillion value of the losses caused by climate change is only heat-related. It doesn't talk about damages from the flooding, from the droughts, from the wildfires, from the more intense hurricanes. It's only heat-related, $28 trillion. So given that, I feel like there are two basic issues that we need to think about. First of all is the moral question, and that is basically, what do we think that God calls us to do in our interrelationships with what God has created? What are we called to do about that? What responsibilities do we have regarding the people and the creatures that we've harmed with our rising demand for fossil fuels through our ever-increasing consumption? What are the moral issues for us there? And also the financial question. Why should we keep supporting a high-risk industry? How long do we keep investing in prolonging the damage that they are caused, that our own church has recommended for divestment? And just as an aside, I've heard the argument that fossil fuel stocks still remain high. They still remain high producing, but it turns out that a big part of that is because they're buying their own stock back. They're not taking their high earnings from the Ukraine invasion and from the COVID recovery and buying more infrastructure. They're buying their stock back, which serves to just kind of keep their stock value high for a while. It appears that they're doing well, but not so much. So based on this, I think we need, and that's what I want to open it up for a little conversation, we need a change in approach. We have tried the top-down approach. We have tried going through resolutions to General Convention. The Church Pension Group has made it clear that they cannot be told what to do. They will not be told what to do, and they firmly believe they need to remain invested in fossil fuels. I know several people. In fact, I talked to Margaret Bullitt Jonas. She and Fletcher Harper with Green Faith were involved in 2015. I think it was 2015 or even earlier than that. They were going to presiding Bishop Catherine Jeffers Shorey, talking to her about divestment. And she wasn't interested in talking about it. Maybe it was too new at the time. But they spent years beating their heads against the wall trying to get divestment to happen. So the point is, top down is not going to happen. So I think that what we need to do is look at an approach that is bottom up. And it's just like what Diana Butler Bass was saying has to happen, is the people who have investments in the pension fund, the pensioners, primarily the clergy who have paid in to the church pension fund, have to go to the fund and say, the fund managers, the board, and demand an option, an alternate way to invest. I don't think that they would get away with telling them to divest from fossil fuels. Why can't they go in with I say give them a choice, but give us a choice. Set up a separate fund, set up an ESG fund. When I was talking to Jerry about this many months ago, he was saying that maybe we shouldn't just go into it as fossil fuel, divest from fossil fuels, but divest from all of these what are called ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance. And that includes then the tobacco issues, the militarism, the for-profit prisons. Set up a fund that uses that list that's already been created by the Episcopal Church, and let the clergy and the lay employees of the Episcopal Church opt for that investment. And then they can align their investing with the values that they profess in Jesus Christ. So my concluding questions to you all is, why can't State Street, who does the endowment investing for for most of the people in the Episcopal Church, and Fidelity, who handles the lay employees, and the church pension fund that handles the clergy, why can't they set up separate funds so that their investors, the pensioners, have a choice that it adheres to ESG principles? This was, again, should we package the fossil fuel divestment issue as an overall ESG movement so that it's not just us tree huggers who are asking for this? How do we get the word out to the clergy and build a coalition? Because in talking to some other people, for example, I talked to Jim Antal with the UCC, who had they actually divested about a decade ago. And he said, you can't do this alone. You've got to build a huge coalition on the ground of people who want to do this to get them to make the change. And then how do we convey that moral case for divestment? How can we gently ask the question, have we sold our souls to achieve what the world tells us is important? And can we invest so that we're proud of what we're leaving for our grandchildren, our children, and our grandchildren, and all future generations? That's it. Oh, and I want to drop in the chat, I've got a list of resources on a document. Let me see if I can figure out. Let me see if yeah. Okay, that will give you, if you go to that, there's a link, there's links to all the different things I cited. The last link on this document is a 2-page thing basically stating a lot of this. So, and I didn't put it up earlier because I didn't want y'all looking at that. I want you listening. so there. And it's also going to be on the website where this recording will be placed. Any thoughts?
Oh, so Robin says ideas. Is there an annual meeting to get Bishop Buddy on board?
That's top down again. So I was wondering if the argument, you know, the greenwashed arguments, especially the fiduciary responsibility one, which I have heard also from some of those folks who have been on that pension board, in that it's a false, it's a red herring in that it could be argued that is not actually responsible. Right. And you kind of pointed that out, but I've wondered if the clergy could actually create a lawsuit that says it is a violation of religious freedom to be forced into a pension, because we essentially are, that does immoral things without giving us an option to opt out. So if the pension fund, you know, if that fiduciary responsibility argument said, oh, what are the most profitable things on the planet? We have to be in there. And child labor was one of them. Would they make the argument that says, no, we can't divest from child labor because those returns are too high? And would the church for a minute tolerate that? So there's a cultural problem in that we don't actually equate the rape and pillage and destruction of all living things and put it on the same level as we would the exploitation of human children. So if we would sue them for making investments into child labor, would we also sue them for making investments into fossil fuels? I've wondered if some kind of case like that could actually have merit.
Well, you know, they have those cases where the children are suing, saying that you've destroyed our future. So yeah, maybe you could, you know, go along with that and say we don't want to invest in stuff that ruins our children's futures. And you're not asking that. I guess it seems to me that it's not going to work to ask them to divest the entire pension fund until you get to a certain level where 50% of the people have opted in, you know. But to say create a separate fund should be no brainer. The Methodists already do it. Their West Park or whatever their group is called, they have 2 different ESG funds you can opt into.
Here's a couple more points. Jerry, you said to divest from fossil fuels. You know, if it's immoral to invest in child labor, it's also immoral to, but instead of calling them fossil funds, I might call it the destruction of the earth. I mean, that's how serious this is.
Right.
In terms of climate. Not everybody thinks so, but I do. And most of us on the call do. A couple other things. Are we sure that those funds do not have better choices? My pension fund, as a local government employee, does not offer a green fund or socially responsible fund. So I brought it up several times to say, hello, we're huge. There's interest. And also, my understanding is that the interest rates are no longer less than those other ones. When green funds first started, they were. And so it was a sacrifice financially to be doing the right thing. But it no longer is the case. So if we can do a comparison of interest rates, perhaps it's not such a hit, or it's not a hit, or it's to the betterment of the fund. The other thing is the choices. So I finally talked to somebody who knew something and said, oh, we have those choices, but the last place you worked didn't select that as a choice for their retirees. So you have to get the last place I worked, the last city I worked, to add that to be one of the choices so I can put my funds in. So I would guess that Fidelity does have some kind of a socially responsible fund or green fund. And I forgot the name of the other fund.
State Street does endowments, but
Okay.
but that's not, neither one of those is the primary. The clergy fund is the big portion of that. And I one time I thought it was JP Morgan, but I checked with our diocesan administrator right before we went on this call, and he said it's not. JP Morgan founded the pension fund back.
But I
in
wonder if there
1912 or
aren't,
something.
I wonder if those investment firms don't have those choices. It's just not one selected currently by the pension fund, but could easily be. Not like we're withdrawing money from one entire entity to put it in an entire different one. It may just be a fund thing, which might make it easier.
Okay, but my sense is the church pension fund is run by a church pension fund. It's not like contracted out to a group to run it. You know, it's like, I think, but I could be wrong. It's not.
The pension fund's actually picking investments and managing accounts.
That was my understanding. They have their own. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, but could be. And you know, is that a good model?
When you're that big, you can kind of
Yeah.
do that thing. Yeah. What do y'all think of trying to do some kind of a grassroots movement among it's clergy have the most money in it. There's a lay portion to it, but it's a minor part of it. How is this a worthwhile? I think it's worthwhile, or I wouldn't have spent this time on it, but is it a worthwhile pursuit to then try to basically be organizing? And the problem is I am not invested in the pension fund. And so I don't have standing in this case. I need to find clergy who, number one, understand it, and number two, who are willing to put, see it as something to put time into, because it's going to take a lot of time. And it could be that retired clergy are the best ones because they do have a little more time.
So
I think maybe I'm mistaken.
So my question, because I don't really know, I don't know why I don't know this, but when people are, or when clergy come new into the church, is a pension fund automatically, are they automatically signed up for the pension fund when they are called to a church?
I think so.
Or do
Yeah.
they have to wait? Like some places you have to wait till you are oh my God, what's the word?
It's an immediate
Be-
investment. You're talking about investment, and yes.
So
Which- yeah.
so a lot of the younger, and I don't mean that the way this sounds, the newer, younger clergy that are coming in are very climate oriented or creation care oriented, or they are, I guess where I live or where I am, a lot of the people are very much into creation care, into becoming beloved community, into the youth, all of that. So if we were to maybe start there, with the clergy coming in, does that make sense?
How? But how? What is the mechanism?
So-
Susan's got an idea.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear Susan's
Well,
idea.
Okay, I think that, we have convocations or conventions or whatever we call them. I forget now, convocation, I think. Anyway, for each diocese, and why can't we do, well, our diocese used to have a pre-conference and they had separate things you could go listen to, and that would be what Lella presented today. People might be interested in that, and then it could spread that way, and then they could make a resolution that one with the Wisconsin diocese could make a resolution to go to the next 3 year from now meeting. I don't know, that's somewhat
General convention.
yeah, but they could also then start doing, like you said, hey, those people keep calling. Hey, why don't the younger people or whoever people are interested, and start calling the people who manage the fund? Because they must have an advisory board or something, right, Jerry?
They do.
So-
Yeah, and
So who is on the board that makes these financial decisions? I mean, and how are they selected? Is this completely independent, essentially, of the Episcopal Church, or are they appointed by, important people, or, how does that work? Do you know anything?
My understanding, they're appointed they're voted on at general convention, right? Or is that, I don't know.
it's
I don't know
either
enough
that
about
or
that.
executive committee. So the answer is both. So the retirement, the pension fund is not subject to the dictates of general convention.
Mhm.
In other words, you can't write a resolution against them or asking them to do anything. But the people who lead these things are appointed by general convention and or executive committee. So there is a connection, but it's not that direct. So yeah, we can't at general convention make something happen that would force the pension to do something. I think, Lella, I was wondering if another, so, you say, oh, it's only clergy. That's not really true, because the majority of funds provided for the pension for the sake of clergy are provided by churches, vestries.
Yeah.
So actually, to make the moral argument, the vestries are the ones being forced to make investments in things that they are religiously opposed to. Clergy we take dirty money, but the vestries are being forced to pay dirty money. So I think there might be a grassroots that's larger than getting clergy who stand with the most to lose, right? But again, we're not asking for the pension to change its evil ways. We're only asking them to create a cleaner option.
Give a choice. Yeah.
Just give us a choice. What's wrong with that? And then to work, against those objections. And I do wonder if vestries are actually an organizing place more than clergy.
So do you think that you could make the argument that the vestries should choose which fund the money should go in instead of the clergy whose pension money it is, essentially?
I think you could do both.
Okay.
So Jim has his hand up, but and then I want to make a comment about what you just said, Lella. But Jim, go ahead.
Yes. So as a person who's been working on these kind of issues, the challenge that we face is that the power remains top down whether we want it to be or not. This is the way of putting it would be like even in the congregation, depending on the size, the people who are appointed to the finance committee are different people oftentimes than are appointed to the social justice committee. And those committees have this framework and pattern of operating. Is this making any sense? That it's the business people that end up on the finance committee, not the social. I'm making a broad statement, but that has been kind of the situation. And I'm in Ann Arbor, and there was a point in which the University of Michigan divested from South Africa. Something it's been made real clear that would no longer happen. And there was a number of years ago when Archbishop Tutu came and got a Wallenberg medal and thanked everybody for divesting. And all the regions were very excited to meet Archbishop Tutu, but they would never do what he, right? Does that make sense? That obviously is so it's like, like there's a part of me that wants to go to the regions and say, oh, I guess you have to revoke the Wallenberg medal because it no longer reflects the values of the University of Michigan, the work that he was doing and caused chaos. Right. But this is the challenge that we're facing in this, that the response is it could be just artificial intelligence repeating the same thing, right? They just send back artificial intelligence saying, we're sorry, but we're not allowed to do that, and it doesn't matter, right? And even if it's the most extreme, right? If you said, would it matter if Ford was which it was anti-Semitic, and would it matter if you were in the 30s? Would it matter? And well, obviously, right? It would. So this is the challenge so I think it still makes sense to organize grassroots, but understand there's also that other power dynamic, and we need to think through how to do that, and also approach it in a way that reflects Scripture and some other ways of communities being called not to do that. So I'll stop now.
Yeah. So going back to what you said about vestries, when you said that, I don't know where my mind is, but anyway, when I was on vestry here at Grace Port Huron, our priest, it's probably because it was before COVID, this is why I've forgotten things. Our priest had questioned the bank we were using and what that bank supported. And how you get this list of all of the, you don't use this bank because it supports this, it does this. So we went through a whole list of different banks and who they supported, what they supported, and if it aligned with our theology. And at that time, she also looked into her retirement fund and the pension fund and where she could put things. And so the vestry, actually, we did that. We did do that. We did. We moved money. We moved $1.2 million, okay, from one place to the next. People were not happy, but we did. We moved money. She moved her pension to different places. I can't think about like where it was, because again, it was before COVID. So but all of those things did happen. So maybe the vestry is the place that we start. Maybe the vestry and talking to the priest. And I understand we're talking about people's money, and in today's world, that's kind of very scary. It's scary anytime, but it's very scary, especially when clergy don't make any money as it is. And so working with their retirement fund, even though we know morally it's the right thing to do, it is scary, right? So I don't know, working with vestries, I think starting at the vestry level is the place. So we would have to figure out how we would approach that. And I see your hands up.
Yeah, I think that you're right that, you know, I think messing with pension funds and so forth is scary, but I don't think it's scary because they might not get the returns that they're looking for. I mean, I think Lella has made a pretty good case.
I agree.
And if we look at the world today, there's a very strong case for getting out of these fossil fuel funds. So part of it is being able to make that case convincingly, you know.
Well, and I agree with you, and I agree with Lella. But again, I'm not invested in that, right? That's not my money, so I'm not invested in that. So,
Yeah, you are.
oh,
If
am
you're
I?
giving to a church, and 18% of that clergy salary is going into you are indeed investing in the church pension fund.
Well, then I guess I
It's
am.
taking a slice of every church's budget that pays clergy, and that
That's true.
slice comes from pledges. So that's another way to spin it. And so Lella, also it might be to not make the goal to change the mind of the pension fund. Maybe the goal is just to learn. It's a tool by which churches can wake up to, oh, we are tied into this. We are wrapped up in this. This is our world, not somebody else's. It's not off to the side. And if you maybe got nothing more than that, that's still valuable.
Lella, you've written letters and, you know, contacted people. I wonder if there's something you've written that could be modified for use as kind of a general, you know, action letter, you know, when environmental organizations ask us, you know, write our congressman, right, or congressperson.
Oh, yeah.
If there's something about a couple paragraph explanation that we could put in a newsletter or somewhere, and then here's action, here's a draft letter, modify it to suit your own, or here's a draft, you know, petition, to make it easy once they understand that they can take action. If we start to see numbers, then that's going to make people more aware.
And I wonder if Episcopal Public Policy Network would take it on, because they send out action items. I don't know if y'all are on their mailing list or not, but they'll send out, call your representative on this thing. It would be contact your, again, I don't know who you,
Yeah.
I guess, talk to your
Because they're
veteran.
staff of the
Identify that.
church, that
Well, I
might
think
put
you
them in a
could.
difficult position.
Yep. Make them uncomfortable. Make some good trouble.
Well, and that's why, you know, maybe we start with the Creation Care newsletters. We've already got people who are interested in the climate or concerned about the climate. It's a natural, you know, allies. But it needs to go to everyone.
So who would write that? Who would do that?
Well, I had written that letter I told you for the
Right.
Creation Care thing, and as far as I know, I could ask Phoebe, but as far as I know, my experience with doing newsletters that I send out is nobody clicks on anything. They may read an article, and you know, an article like this, you would not put the whole thing. You would put 2 paragraphs and then you link to the rest of the article, and nobody will click. It's I find it frustrating just because I put a lot of great stuff in. I want people to click on, but nobody does. So yeah, I am not sure. I don't know what her circulation is.
Well, then maybe it needs to be separate than a newsletter
I don't know how to get.
to stand out.
I
Hey,
talked
Jeanette,
about going to
Jeanette
general
wants-
convention and talking to people, and I don't know, that never came to pass. But
And what do you have an idea?
Well, I don't know if it's a slightly tangential idea, but whenever anybody is sending out stuff, newsletters and emails and stuff like that, I personally really appreciate if I'm being asked to share any information that's in it, that it be done. And, you know, maybe this is just like MailChimp or something else. I don't know how exactly this happens, but when I get an email that says at the top, view this in your browser, what that means is that I can create a link to that content easily. And then I can put that into something else, you know, because like we use at our church, we use Realm as the product for our directory and for internal communications with everybody, for committees, for various groups, for all kinds of stuff. And realm is compromised in terms of the sophistication of its messaging. And I am not able to forward an email that I receive externally into the realm system. So I've got to either recreate that email with all the content, or I need to be able to put a link to that content into my message and basically wrap a few, a sentence or two around it as to what that's about. And I'm just saying in general, if we have the capability, if anyone has the capability to send things out in a way that there's actually a page to go to rather than the content of the email alone, that can be very helpful. So I'll get off my
It's 7 minutes after the hour, folks. I'm gonna
Let me make this quick offer, Jerry. If anybody does want this presentation done for a vestry or for any other group, I'm happy to do it, or I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint for you to do it. Because I continue to think the one-on-one talking is very effective, as opposed to expecting somebody to read something. So I'm just putting that out there. Just let me know.
That's great.
Okay, that's it.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing, Lella. I'm gonna butter up my priest. I have to talk her into it first. I mean, yeah. Again, I'm new to this. I'm still new on this vestry, so they only allow me to do certain things. I can't change the world in a day.
So
But
can
I like
you
that.
just put it in the minutes or something, or attach it to the minutes or whatever?
What's
Me?
that?
No, I cannot.
No, I mean, could
Lella?
Lola do that? Give
Oh.
us what she just said she could give
Oh,
us.
yes. Yes.
Yes.
Put what?
Put a link.
PowerPoint
Is it a link
and-
somewhere, Lella?
PowerPoint to a link.
Do
I don't
host
have
that thing?
I don't have the PowerPoint itself linked anywhere, but you have a recording of this that if you just wanted
Right.
to share the talk
Yeah, we
part,
could do that,
Yeah, we could
or
do-
request from you the thing.
I'm happy to talk one-on-one and have a continuing conversation too. So, yeah.
This does
And
strike me as, this is the long haul. You start somewhere, and that's with the, it's also fairly narrow in a way. I mean, it is vast if you talk about all kinds of divestment or economic justice, but this particular narrow slot that says the Episcopal Pension Fund is going to be a cause that a few folks would find important. And I think that's what you do, is you build that small community of those for whom the vast many of things that they might want to give themselves to would take this on, and then you start fighting from the outside. Seems to me. Anyway, I'm talking when I said we need to stop.
Well, are you going to
So
be there?
we can stay
in Ohio? Are you going to be in Ohio? Low.
yeah,
Are you?
yeah.
Okay.
We'll just give people permission to say bye, and then we can continue if you want. I've got a kid to pick up here shortly. So I'm going to burn some fossil fuel, quite a bit actually, because I'm going to go sit in a stinking 200-car line in a school parking lot.
I hate that too. Thank you. Thank you
Anyway,
so much
blessings
for joining
all.
us.
Exactly right.
Well,
Lella,
turn off your car. Set a
Conversation.
precedent.
It's a Prius. I mean, it'll shut itself off, but still, we need to stop recording. I guess.